Okay, good morning. I guess it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the library. It's fantastic to see so many people. I know that many of you are being conscripted to go here, so I get the mandatory audience, but I actually think it's kind of a great opportunity to maybe see something new, change of pace, get out of the classroom, and more importantly, I love to see the interactions between our excellent faculty, and these guys are some of our favorites. I mean, not to play favorites, but our favorites. This is a panel discussion about the psychology behind this book called The Dispossessed. This is a piece of science fiction from the 70s. That's our one college, one book program this year, and it's a really neat little book. It is a book that makes you think differently about the world. It's about these two different planets that interact with each other, and they live in societies vastly different from each other. And that's why we picked it. So sort of in this world that we come from, where we're seeing the life very differently depending on where you come from, your background, maybe how you see the world politically. This is a book that explores those kind of topics. And one of the things it does is it makes us see relationships differently, because the different planets view relationships between families, between people, how we trust each other, how we change in relationships quite differently from each other. And so we thought we wouldn't be doing our job to cover the topics of this book without asking our people that know a lot about these things to talk about it, which is what we're doing here today. So I want to thank Laura Lauzon-Collins, Nick Shizas, and Mitch Baker from Psychology for sharing their expertise and views on this book. If you are interested, this book is for sale in the bookstore. You can also check it out for free. There are copies right back there on the back shelf, or talk to a librarian. We will help you out. And I will go, but I want to say thank you also to Michelle, our sign language interpreter, for being here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to our faculty members. Thank you all for your time and expertise. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I think I'm going to be starting it off. Thanks for coming, you guys. Again, I know many of you were kind of voluntold, but thank you for coming. So we are each going to take kind of some different topics in this book. And I've got some slides here to accompany mine. And so what I really want to talk about would be walls, belonging, and connection. And I'm guessing that no one has read the book, which is totally okay. But the book starts with a description of a wall. And that wall is a boundary between these two civilizations that have existed for 7 generations. Okay, so there's one civilization on the home planet, the mother planet, if you will, and then there's another civilization that fled to the moon. Okay, so they're all existing on the moon. And the only place that they intersect is on this landing pad, and there's kind of a wall around the landing pad. And the wall has existed for more than 100 years. And it's kind of falling apart. And again, at the beginning of the book, she describes the wall as just an idea of a boundary. Okay? And so we start off with this wall. And I think that the book and the wall gives us kind of an important thread that I'd like to focus on, and that is the thread of what does it actually cost to belong somewhere? And I'd like you guys all to think about that. What does it cost to belong somewhere? What makes genuine connection possible? Okay? So again, we've got this wall. This idea of the wall becomes more real, it is a way to separate these societies out. So again, she describes it as this low, crude wall that you could easily climb over. It's existed for 7 generations, and yet no one climbs over the wall. Okay? People respect the barrier, and it's about how the wall's power was never really physical. Okay? It's although it is physically there, the wall is social and it's psychological. So once the idea of a boundary becomes enforced, people enforce it on themselves, and they no longer need it to be a physical thing. It becomes a psychological thing. So our psychological walls work the same way. So again, the idea of the wall becomes like psychologically load-bearing. Once people form this protective mental structure, they actively resist it being dissolved. So I'd like you guys to kind of think about walls in your own life. What walls do you have that you've built up that aren't physical things, but are mental things? Walls that separate you from other people, or they separate, but they also keep us protected as well, right? And they are real in our head, even if they're not real physically. Okay, so let's go ahead. I've got kind of three main themes. So the first theme that I wanted to talk about here is a theme of norms, belonging, and the hidden costs of community. So belonging has a price, and in this book, we see the main character really pays a very significant price for not belonging. So the main character's name is Shevik, and he never really fits in. So he's one of the people who's on the moon. Now the moon is a society with no government. I'd like you guys to just imagine that for a minute. There's no central government, there's no money, there's no laws. Everybody's supposed to be equal and performing the job that they are best suited to. So if you have a society with no formal laws and no government, do you think it's just complete and utter chaos, or do you think something else might start to creep in to control people? Do you guys have any ideas what that might be that might start to control people's behaviors? Any thoughts?
Without government.
Have you guys heard of social norms? Okay, so norms start to become the things that control people's behavior. So instead of it being a formal law, we start to see social norms, and these norms are really powerful. And that is because everybody wants to belong. No one wants to feel isolated. No one wants to feel like they are not connected. And so, although people don't have to follow laws in this society, and although the society is supposed to be like this open society where everybody has freedom of choice, it ends up being constricting because people do have to follow the laws of social norms, okay? And so there is definitely social coercion through these norms. And if you don't abide by them, I've got the fit in or fade out. If you don't abide by them, you start getting not included. You start getting ignored. And that is what we see happen to the main character, Shevik. He's a physicist, and he thinks differently than other people, and he wants to collaborate with people from the other world. And that is seen as a big social no-no. And so it's not that people, it's not that he's jailed, it's not that he's, sent somewhere else, but he just stops being included. People start ignoring him. He's not getting like the job placements that he wants anymore. And he starts to kind of fade out. So conformity is enforced through this social pressure. And again, Shevik, the character in the book, is penalized for thinking differently. And in this, like on their world, intellectual independence is framed as a flaw. So what I wanted to kind of then go into here is this idea of belonging. So belonging is rarely unconditional. Usually when we belong, we've got to do things in order to belong. Okay, we've got to follow certain norms. There are a couple things from psychology that we can think about here. One is social identity theory. So social identity theory is the idea that a good part of how we see ourselves comes from the groups that we belong to. Okay? So I would like you guys to all think about groups that you belong to. Okay, this might be being a community college student. This might be a particular hobby or sport that you engage in. And each one of these are going to connect you to different communities. There are certain rules that you've got to follow to still be accepted in those communities. And through those, you know, your behavior and how you see yourself is shaped. And it's really hard for us to let go of those connections because it starts to become something that we internalize. It becomes a part of how we see ourselves. The next one is normative social influence. So we tend to conform to perceived group norms in order to not be kicked out. Okay, so we don't want to be rejected by the group, so we tend to conform, and that usually means a self-silencing. There was a whole line of research in the 1990s about self-silencing. All of it initially focused on women, again, this was in the 1990s, about women self-silencing in order to not make waves, in order to not create tension. And just by a show of hands, have you ever kept your mouth shut at an event where there are other people? You haven't said what you thought. You haven't said what you needed because you don't want to make waves. How many people have had that experience? I would assume that is most of us. And again, that's really a suppressing of your beliefs or of your needs or, you know, who you are. And a little bit of that, I think, is expected. But when we start to do that, so much so that we lose who we are, then that can be detrimental to yourself. So this original research, Dana Jack was looking at the connection between this self-censoring and depression. You know, that when you censor yourself again and again and again, and you don't state what you need, it can lead you to become depressed. You know, you can lose touch with who you are. And we definitely see this with Shevik. Again, Shevik is not able to fully express who he is because he's getting pushed more and more and more to the sidelines of his community. And this leads us to our second theme here, which is shame, ostracism, and the othering of difference. So here, you know, as Shevik is getting ostracized, as he's getting rejected, he is experiencing social pain. And there has been some really interesting research in the last couple decades on social pain. It does turn out that social pain is processed in the same part of the brain that real pain is processed. So if you were to break a bone, there's a part of your brain that processes that pain, okay? The same part of the brain is a part that processes social pain. When we get rejected from other people, by other people, that's the same part of the brain that's doing that processing. So when we say that was painful when the person didn't text me back, we really mean it, okay? We're not necessarily experiencing it physically the same way, but mentally, it is genuinely painful. So the pain of exclusion evolved because belonging kept us alive. We are a social species. We need community. We need to be connected to one another. And so loneliness, when we feel it, it's like a survival signal, okay? It's not just like an emotion. It tells us that a basic need is not being met. We're not feeling connected to the group, and that could be a survival issue, okay? Lonely brains, we know, there's been a whole bunch of research done on this. Lonely brains are different than brains that feel like they're connected. Lonely brains tend to be more vigilant, meaning like they're paying attention more to threat. They tend to be more sensitive to threat. They perceive more hostility. So when you feel lonely, you're more likely to see other people as being how? Just say it out loud. As threatening, right? You're more likely to see other people as being threatening. Okay, so social pain starts to become the lens through which everything else is seen. And I am really running out of time. So what I want to do is just do kind of one more topic here and bring this into an idea of shame versus guilt, which I think is a really important topic when we're thinking about this and we're thinking about community. So for shame versus guilt, I'm sure everybody's heard of these two different emotions. These are called self-conscious emotions, okay? Let's start with guilt. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad, okay? And I would like you guys to think about, how does community, a community that you belong to, use shame? So think about if you are doing something that your community doesn't want you to do. How is shame different from guilt? Guys, think about this for a second. How does guilt feel? Like, I ate a cookie when I shouldn't have. How does that feel? How does it feel, you guys? It feels bad. Is it overwhelming? Probably not. It's fixable. It's a behavior. We can change it, right? How about shame? How is shame different? It's a perception, and it's a perception of self. It's a perception of how you see yourself. It's a self-judgment. It's an identity thing. So when you are a part of a community that is placing shame on you, that can be overwhelmingly distressful, okay? It's overwhelmingly distressing. Shame doesn't just hurt. It attacks the self. It attacks who you are. It attacks how you see yourself. It's a part of your identity. And it's much more overwhelming than just guilt. Communities don't just punish behavior, they pathologize people. Okay, when you don't fit and you are made to feel shame for not fitting in, that community is pathologizing you. And that's one of the themes in the book that we see with the main character.
That's great.
I think that that's kind of all that I have time for. And I know that it's kind of hard to move in, because they are talking about different themes. But I hope that, that gives you some sense of the book and some of the psychological themes that are running through it.
Awesome. If I could just please go ahead, applaud. Just to follow up on your thought here,
Yeah.
do you think our society, encourages shame? I see you nodding your head. Do you mind sharing how so?
I think it depends on what you specifically mean by society, but at least linguistically in English, the way we specifically say things,
Sure.
the way English words things like I am bad, it's enforcing shame almost. In other languages, you'll say something like, oh, I feel bad, or I feel sick, versus
Sure.
I am sick. And we can do that in English, but it's not as common. And I feel like that happens.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was thinking about this, like, this converts into likes.
Yeah.
If I catch you doing something really stupid, this is going to make me more popular. And I don't know, so it just prompted a thought that I want you to think about. Are we perpetuating this sense of shame, this culture of shame, where I get to thrive off other people's shame? So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to him, unless he's got some other comments. But I just wanted to share that your talk definitely made me think of some things. So thank you for that. So.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think conformity it serves a lot of functions in society, and I think if people don't conform to certain social norms that are, especially laws, right? Not only are there penalties, but if we don't conform to certain social norms that we're kind of expected to follow, then ostracism happens and shame happens, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and I promise I'm going to just say one thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I would like you guys to think about social media. As Mitch just said, I think that we all have these little machines in our pocket with us all of the time that can can be a source of shame for us.
Yeah.
And are telling us to feel shame.
Absolutely. Yeah, why not? But, folks, I wrote some ideas about Alfred Adler. I wrote some ideas about some stuff in my human sexuality class. Somehow I came up with like 6 pages of notes, which probably be an hour, right, to go through all that. But as I went through the book and I read about these 2 planets, Anaris, which is an anarchistic collectivist society, and Uras, which is a really rich, hierarchical, capitalistic society planet. One of the things that I thought about was living in Chicago and living in the southwest suburbs all my life and being raised here. But I have a whole extended family, like all of my family, all 36 of my first cousins, all 57 of my second cousins, all my aunts and uncles. Everybody else lives in Greece, right? And so I'm one of the only family members who live here. And so traveling back and forth, certainly it's not like traveling to different planets, right? But spending a lot of summers and a lot of time overseas where my family was from, I saw like a lot of differences, collectivist society versus individualistic society. And so like I said, my folks they're from Greece, and that's just like one of the biggest contrasts that I saw. That's like the biggest thing that popped up in my head as I was going through the book. So my folks are from a small island, and people there have a strong sense of altruism, much like that collectivist planet. And people are willing to do things for people without seeking rewards, just because it seems like it's the right thing to do over there. And with that as a cultural standard, it's easy to see how a place like that lends itself to have community and togetherness in a society, because at least people on that particular island that my mom and dad are from, they look out for each other and they care about their community members. And it's not to say that in the United States it's not like that per se. We are just more of an individualistic society versus Greece, if you will, or especially versus that little island that they come from. We're caring for people, and the needs of the community just over there, I noticed, is just more important than the individual needs of people. So whenever I travel over there and I visit my friends and family, it's more community and person-based, like we bring things to people's houses. People get together all the time, and there's just more of a community feel, right? I mean, here, living in the States all my life, like I said, it's not always the case here. Life revolves around working, being productive, being busy, trying to reach your financial goals, trying to reach a certain level of social status, making money, and trying to get ahead financially just seems like it's more important than having fun and spending time with other people and taking care of other people. I know that's just how things are. I'm not saying it's bad, but because I love it here, and I like living here, and I've had all my opportunities here, right? It's just one of the differences that I've noticed in the book and, of course, in what I've experienced. So anyway, Professor Brower's in the back there, and I was sharing with him just a quick example of a couple summers ago. Hey, Tony, that there was a tourist on my mom and dad's island who just kind of went to go check out what this blue zone place is all about, where people live to 100, right? And I guess there was a villager whose battery died in his car, and he asked this guy walking by if he could help him drive him to some auto shop to get a new battery. And this tourist said something to go get your own battery, find your own way. And everybody on the island shunned this guy, right? Didn't talk to him, didn't want to serve him at the restaurants, did not interact with him at the beach, because he's not, not part of the communal kind of community of helping people out. So, anyhow, folks, it's an interesting place. So I want to just maybe a couple more words. And Laura, in my 20 times that I've been to that island, I've maybe seen 5 police officers there. So I'm not saying it's like the island. It's like the planet, right? Because there is social norms. There is social norms and things like that you got to look out. There's just not a lot of crime. A couple of other things that I wanted to say in comparison. People stop by my mom and dad's house almost every day, and they bring certain vegetables that they grow, or they bring meat, or they bring eggs, and my dad barters with them and gives them produce, gives them the lemons that my dad makes, gives them peaches, gives them olive oil, tomatoes, all the things that my dad grows. And so they kind of like exchange that kind of stuff over there, which is interesting. And that's kind of like the first planet, of course, that the character grew up in. So people get together all the time, but Dr. Adler certainly would say that there is this concept called social interest, where you have to do things for the betterment of your society, and that social interest is like the huge barometer of psychological health, and we're motivated by wanting to help other people, and like, you know, and not being so superior over other people. The last thing, folks, that I maybe wanted to say, and then maybe we'll talk some more in a little bit, is whenever I travel there, people don't ask me about my job. They don't ask me about my accomplishments. When I meet new people here in Chicago, that's one of the things that they do ask about, is what kind of work you do. So we are more in an individualistic, achievement-focused society here, where other places in the world are not necessarily like that. And certainly over there, people generally do not care if you're rich or poor. They tend to care if you're a decent person, and you know, and if you can interact and cooperate with people. Growing up in Burbank, which was also fine, right? It was also cool. I liked being there too. I just remember there was a pressure to wear certain brand name clothing, right? And the clothes that you wore and what you wore came with a certain social status, and I always noticed that growing up. My folks kind of thought that was weird, coming from where they came from, right? And I remember my folks bought me some blue gym shoes, which weren't even leather. They were like some fabric shoes with white stripes on them, and legit, they had no brand. There was no brand on these shoes. And the kids in 7th grade, I remember, were asking me like, where would you get those from, and what brand are those? And I said, dude, I'm looking at the shoe. There is no brand on here. And I remember the comment was like, are those like great value shoes or something like that? You know, like, I think that's the brand from Walmart, you know? And I said, I don't know, maybe they are. But when I traveled that summer overseas, people loved my shoes, right? And they're like, dude, you know, send some to us, because they were pretty durable. So people didn't care about that stuff. And my mom bought me this shirt that had the word sport on it, right? With some weird graphic. It's not even a brand. It's just, I think she probably did get it from Walmart, you know? And, but people never commented on my clothing while I was out there. They didn't comment on anything that I was wearing. People didn't really care what I wore. Social status just didn't seem to be about, you know, what you looked like or anything like that. And then when I came back in August to start 8th grade, I proudly wore my sports shirt. And then everybody started calling me Sport. And then I didn't wear that shirt anymore. So when I think about those two societies, or those two planets, I think about those two places that I've kind of traveled to, you know? Now, I would say, on a final note, I can't say that Greece, and I can't say that Ikaria, which is the island that my mom and dad are from, is certainly a utopia. Your gas is going to cost you $9 per gallon, right? Your electricity is going to get shut off. A doctor, one of my good friends, who's a endocrinologist in Chicago money, or in the United States money, makes about $75,000 per year. And so they don't make a lot of money, but that's a lot of money for overseas from where they're from. And so it's not a perfect utopia kind of place, but it is interesting to kind of look at differences in collectivist societies and individual societies. So anyway, I have more, but I'm gonna defer over to my colleague Mitch, who's gonna give us some more ideas.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning, everyone. Don't applaud to me, just these guys.
No.
Just cutting everybody off.
No, this is great.
Welcome. My focus is going to be on questioning identity, trust, and relationships. Now, I'm going to ask you to kind of reflect on some of the things of your own experiences, and that might be a little hurtful or bring up some great memories. Are you going to, oh, thanks. If you could just click on this. Is anyone familiar with Punch the Monkey, the macaque?
Oh.
Okay. So there was this macaque that was born last year, and the mother abandoned it in a Japanese zoo. And, the staff tried to, nurse it and try to integrate it with the other monkeys, and they were completely rejecting of this monkey. And then IKEA sent over a bunch of toys for not just for that macaque, but sent over that orangutan. And, Punch became attached to that thing, to that toy. So the thing is, we can't control, no one has to be born. You can't control who your family is. You can't control those dynamics, but we can find alternative ways to attach to other things. We can attach to a blanket, in this case, an orangutan, nature, right? It's living and fragile, all these things. And through that relationship, you have to know love. You have to feel love to be able to give love, to receive love, and you have to make yourself vulnerable. In this case, that toy makes him more or I don't know if the gender of it, the sex rather, of that macaque. But the difference is once it got that and got comfortable, it started to be accepted by the other monkeys. And there's another image that later on it was groomed. Don't worry about it, that's okay. But it eventually got accepted into there and it learned how to integrate and socialize. And then that's pertinent for its survival. Now, Laura, I will ask you to get rid of that monkey because no one's going to be listening to me because that thing's way too cute. So thanks, I appreciate that. All right. Now, as my colleagues have described, the book The Dispossessed has two very different societies. One prizes individual ownership, ambition and personal freedom, and the other is community and love and shared labor. Or not love, but shared labor and collective obligation. And as my colleague Nick pointed out, neither is perfect. Now, the focus I'm going to kind of look at is how we often treat the concepts of autonomy and interdependence. Our society really treats autonomy and interdependence as opposites. But what if they were mutually reinforcing? What if you needed to have a sense of autonomy and interdependence to have like this, as close to this blissful panacea as possible? Because most relationships I know, the partners display healthy levels of both. Right? They can attach themselves, they could be part of something, but at the same time, they have a personal identity. Now, let me ask you this, and you don't have to say it out loud or anything like that, but, when have you felt free and safe in a relationship? So just think about when a time you felt free or safe. What is that relationship dynamic like? What made that possible? What are the ingredients to make that possible? Now, the question is this: how do we learn to be our own person and at the same time belong to something larger than ourselves? Okay? What kind of relationships allow people to feel both independent and deeply connected at the same time? Think about that. When are you able to feel independent and deeply connected? I could think of a few examples, right? Family, I'm me, but I also have a larger group. Classroom, friend groups. There's a lot of tribalism, good or bad, right? We have tribalism to our schools that we're a part of. If you're in a fraternity, sorority, nation, to religion, to neighborhood, right? To islands. Now, the thing is that psychology tells us that the healthiest form of independence are not built in isolation, right? So to have independence, you're not isolated. That's loneliness. And we've all felt that. In fact, attachment research shows that people are most capable of autonomy when they feel securely connected. When trust and others are available, when others are responsive, we consider them reliable. That's when we're willing to take more risks and speak more openly and freely. So the question is not whether we depend on one another. The answer is we do. Right? So connection, in this book, one of the takeaways was about this concept of freedom, and connection doesn't limit freedom. I kind of think it enables it. The more you feel connected, the more free you are willing to try and explore new things. Going away to know that you have a home to come back to. Willing to go to school and to know that you have someone to support you And if not, hopefully you find like this social convoy here, right? Your chosen family. Can one be free at the same time as having possessions and being in a relationship? That's the other question. If I have like a mortgage to pay, if I have people to answer to, people to rely on me, am I truly free? I don't know about the answer to that. I like to think that it gives me security, makes me free to do the things I want, but I don't know. It depends on your individual interpretation of the word freedom. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about some attachment styles. And when I talk about these, Mary Ainsworth, is the theorist who really championed this. There's a few others, but she really kind of did this strange experiment, which I'm not going to go into. But she did describe that there's like attachment patterns. And when I just kind of briefly give definitions so we have context, think about your own experiences. Think about the early experiences you've had. Think about the times, not when you were a baby, no one remembers being born, but like your elementary school years, the connections. Did you have a cheerleader at the soccer game for you? Was someone around to drive you? Did you have like, was someone home to feed? Did you have dinners at the table? That type of thing, right? Who was around? And not the one-offs. I mean, parents will upset you for like, I could tell you there's probably many things I remember that one time you did this, but the overall takeaway is the important thing. Did you feel loved and safe? Did you feel protected? So she broke down essentially there's two types of attachments. There's secure and insecure. Secure is a one-off, and the good news is, folks, is that most of us are secure. About 2/3 of us will identify as securely attached. And then there's insecure with different subtypes. So the secure attached, which is again the most common, this one is where people feel secure, and it's through that security that they're able to explore their surroundings. Right? It's through this security that I'm able to say hello to you, go up to you, feeling comfortable that even if I get rejected, I won't identify as shameful. I might feel like, ah, damn, that didn't work out. Try to be better the next time. But what brings this about? What kind of interactions do you think would instill trust in a relationship? And I ask you, does anyone have any opinion? And I know it's not our culture to raise our hand and speak out in a group, but what are some behaviors that would facilitate trust? Yeah.
And I'm going to make it worse because I have a microphone.
All right, thanks.
Not only do you get punished for raising your hand.
Okay. All right. Okay. Communication and overall just providing yourself when you're needed.
Yeah.
Okay. Please
Yeah.
take this microphone.
No, thanks. Thank you. I think anyone else have any ideas? Fair enough. The idea with families.
What if in a case where a young kid or any of us get in trouble, right? We do something wrong, and then we admit that to our families, right? And they don't yell at us on top of it, and we don't get in big trouble. And they kind of help us through their process. I would imagine that could be a piece of trust.
Oh, absolutely. But are you going to start there, right? So having family that's consistent, meaningful interactions, that's going to facilitate that trust. And then ultimately from there, to your point, Nick, that's when I'm going to open up. That's when you're going to go to those loved ones and say, I did something and I need some help. And they know that even though I did something wrong, I did something bad, you're going to help me get through it and work through it. And that's going to facilitate trust. And if you have those experiences, you're going to feel secure. And that way, when your partner goes away to school or whatever it is and goes to work, you're not going to be like, oh my God, they're cheating on me. Oh, I'm going to lose them. I got to hold on to them. Because that describes some of the insecure patterns, right? And the insecure pattern is there's insecure avoidant, insecure resistant, and disorganized. I'm not going to really focus on the disorganized, but the avoidant is what often is dubbed as a failure to cling. It's little interaction. The individual doesn't really care if loved ones or caregivers are around, and they in fact might even avoid them, right? Avoid engagement because maybe they've been let down. So what does this interaction look like? If you're avoiding, I'm going to leave you before you leave me, I'm the one that does the hurting, right? What kind of interactions does one have to facilitate that piece? And I'm only going to talk for 2 more minutes. I'm watching my time. So what facilitates that? What brings out that type of person in a relationship? This could be someone who's unavailable, or just someone having caregivers who are just outright rejecting. And unavailability comes in different ways. Maybe I'm working really hard to put food on the table, make sure the mortgage is paid. I'm trying to be there. There can be some warmth, but it doesn't always have a lot of warmth. It's just unavailable. It doesn't always have to be intentional. And the resistant one tends to be clingy, right? The resistant. And you try to, and the resistant is the avoidance of the separations. That's what makes them the resisting separation, right? It always was confusing when I first learned this. Why is it resistant? What am I resisting? I'm resisting separations because I always like to be around you. Now, what happens here is that you may respond angrily, passively or actively, right? Passive aggressive, active aggression, when upon the return. But what this is, you end up having this kind of attachment pattern, this resistant pattern, when you have inconsistency, right? The others are unavailable. This is inconsistent, where I don't know who's available. And the thing is, when I finally feel good, I don't want to let you go, right? Because if I do, I don't know where I'm going next. So my safety and security is in you, and I'm really hesitant to leave that. So the question is, and then the last one is the disorganized. And disorganized tends to be kind of a blend of the two, but there's also some odd behaviors, and sorry for that word, but they might just scream randomly, have fearful interactions, look right through you. There's a lot of differences, and there's fewer than 5% of the population, I think it is disorganized. But that one is often kind of comes about through neglect and maybe outright abuse. Okay? Now the question is, do these patterns foreshadow the type of relationship you're going to have later on in life? Does the dynamics you were raised in when you were 5, 6, 7, 3 years old, do those play an influence on the relationship you have today at 20? So, and on that note, there's a lot more to it, but I'll just kind of want to kick it back to these guys. So.
Should we open it up for, yeah, why don't we open it up for questions or
And
anything
I
you
will
were all
come to you
curious
with the
about?
microphone so that everyone can hear, because it's a big group. So.
Anything you're curious about? Any comments? Mary Faith.
Wait, I'm coming. We can't hear you.
Yeah. We got a good question coming.
Was this book written to describe psychological topics, or did you guys find it and then see things in it and choose it?
A little bit of both. I mean, it's a science fiction novel, right, from 1974.
Yes, and I'm definitely not the Ursula Le Guin expert, but we've been working with it all year, so I'll just do a quick kind of thing. One of the great things with science fiction is that it helps you imagine new worlds, and if you're the good writers, bring us into that world in ways where we feel it, right? We're part of it, which is different than reading a textbook or other kinds of learning that we might do. Ursula Le Guin is definitely not a psychologist, but she is exploring how we interact as humans, and she explores those relationships. So she's really interested in government. She's really interested in how societies work and interpersonal relationships. So I don't know that she would say it's intentionally psychological, but just in who she is, it's intentionally psychological, right? So that's also why it's kind of a fantastic book. Laura, you're one of our great readers. You may have thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, in I think almost any novel, you've got like deep psychological themes that can be pulled out. And I completely agree with Troy that science fiction, good science fiction, should allow you to place yourself in your society's problems and concerns in maybe a different context, so that you can maybe think about it in a slightly different way and approach it from a different angle. But you should still be able to see those same themes. And, because we're all human, those themes are going to come up again and again and again, just like they do in real life.
One of the great ironies of science fiction is most of the time it's not about the science, right? It's about,
for
it's
sure.
about us right now.
Yeah,
right?
it's often about relationships, right? It's just embedded in this other imaginary world.
One of my favorite experiences was 2 years ago on this day, we were back at this table here talking about the psychology of Frankenstein. And I mean, there were so many concepts. And then maybe 10 years ago, we talked about that zombie book.
Yeah.
And so you could pick out psychology in just about any novel.
Yeah.
So it wasn't written specifically as that, but probably with those ideas in mind.
Yeah. And it's a safe space. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
reasons we chose it is we're in a society that's greatly divided,
Yeah.
where one side won't talk to the other. And how do you have safe conversations about that? Picking a science fiction book doesn't seem like you're talking about Republicans and Democrats, but many of the conversations we've had this year are about Republicans and Democrats and why we can't talk to each other. And this isn't about that either, but it kind of is about that, right? Like, how do we feel safe? How do we feel belonging? How do we have a sense of identity? These are all things that I think our society is in great need of. And so again, this conversation isn't inherently political, but it is inherently political because we have to figure out how we can get along as people and not blow ourselves up, or other countries for that matter.
But Troy, it's impossible to not see those things, right? As I'm reading through this book, and you have the exploitation of labor and the poverty that's being hidden from society on this other planet, right? You can't help but make those parallels. You know, I didn't know I was going to talk about Greece until I started reading the book, and then these ideas started popping into my head. So you never know what kind of ideas and concepts are going to kind of pop up. And I would like to say one more thing. Our college addresses a book every year, and we try to make curriculum and programs from different books. And I know Troy has spearheaded that for many years.
Yeah, yeah, he's done a great job with that too. I appreciate that. The interesting thing, I found a lot of political and cultural overtones or undertones to this book, personally. And, and conflict isn't the enemy of a community, right? You know, anytime you're going to have a sense of autonomy, anytime autonomy exists, you're going to have some type, conflict is inevitable. Because I have sovereignty, you have sovereignty, we might not see things as everything is. So conflict is a natural thing. But how do you have conflict and not break up? You know, think about a relationship. How do you have an argument and be like, that's it, I'm out of here, we're done? You know, how do you do that, right? And that's creating that safe space. There are some rules of engagement, you know, like where dominance just can't be the one thing that does it. Whoever's like the biggest, loudest speaker in the room gets all the time. There has to be some rules. There has to be, instead of like letting people know that there's something free, that I can say something, that I can share with you my thoughts and know and be vulnerable and know that you're not going to use that against me. Right? That's kind of what I got from that book, from that perspective.
All right. Other thoughts and comments? Doesn't have to be about the book. Relationships, communities. Yes, I'm coming.
So we talked a lot about how individuals, like, in trying to be like independent, there can also be that sign of like loneliness. What about those moments where like individuals are in groups that they feel like they should belong in, but then they still somehow get that loneliness of like not belonging still, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
That happens.
I mean, you can absolutely be lonely in a group, right? You don't have to be isolated. And when people are by themselves, they don't have to feel lonely. Sometimes it's good to be by yourself and sit with your own thoughts. So being with a group, doesn't necessarily, mean that you're connected to that group. And I think, some of the stuff that I was talking about at the end, I think connects to your question. I think that sometimes it is a matter of identity and how you see yourself. Do you see yourself as a part of the group? Is there a part of your identity that is connected to that group? And that can be a shared feeling then of connectedness. But if you don't see yourself in that group, you can go into it feeling disconnected. And especially when that aspect of yourself that maybe isn't in line with the group, when that is tied to a sense of shame, I think that can create more of a division. So, you see like all of this group has a certain characteristic, or maybe maybe all of the people in this group come from money and you don't come from money. And, some people would not feel a sense of shame about that, but some people would feel a sense of shame about that. And when you feel shame, it makes it much more difficult to then connect to the wider group, that piece of your identity is connected to that feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to try to. It's not always easy to find meaning in every interaction that you have. But I mean, that's maybe the advice, as a psychology professor, as a therapist, I would tell people to try to find some type of purpose and meaning in the interactions that they have with the people that they tend to be with. And you may find that interacting with a particular group, even though you're within a group, you may not connect with them. You might not have things in common, or you may not find it as meaningful, and then you may have to just kind of check out and try to find a different group. But that's the recommendation that I would maybe give, is to try to find some meaning and purpose within that small group, or some common connection with them.
Loneliness is, I'm an empath by nature, and like when I see it, it just like hurt, it's not altruistic. It's like, I want to make you feel better so I don't feel so bad. I mean, I wish it was the other way around, but that's really probably my primary motivation, if I'm being honest. One thing, even in a classroom where we would just give some presentations, and I asked everyone, please just put their stuff away, so that way someone's looking at you. Because how many times is it so easy to feel alone when we're like looking down at our phones, we're looking at some other thing, and I'm not paying attention to the person in front of me. And feeling invisible in a group is very hurtful. No one hears you, no one sees you. It takes away, it's draining. Laura talked about the pain that it feels, and it's very real pain. I mean, I wish I had an answer. It says, it comes down to choose the people that choose you. And we work really hard to fit into groups, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I also understand that, if you didn't have that group, sometimes you'd have nowhere else to go. And, but the real thing is like to try to, when not, very Dr. Seussical in nature, but when nothing changes, nothing changes. So if you keep staying in that same context, that same environment, that loneliness is just going to get even more exacerbated.
And I just wanted to add one more thing. As you were talking, I was just thinking, and also what Nick had said. I do think that trying to find connections in the groups that you're in can be really useful. But when you are finding that you cannot be your true self with a group, I do think that at that point it's worth looking for additional groups.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you cannot truly be known by someone that you are performing for. So if your behavior is constantly a performance to fit in, I think that that's always going to feel lonely to some degree. You can't really feel connected. And again, this gets at identity and how you see yourself. There's a lot of bad stuff about social media, right? Like that makes us feel bad in a lot of different ways. But one good thing is that it does allow you to connect to a bunch of people that we've never been able to connect to in the past. It can help you to find your group, your tribe, the people, your chosen family. And so I encourage people to reach out and try to find those connections.
Mm-hmm. One way I think that could be helpful for anybody listening or for anybody in our audience is to volunteer somewhere that you really, really care about, right? Because you're likely of meeting people who care about the same thing, right? And you may have similar interests, at least in that way, right? I give you a small example. I did some research work when I was a student at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and I was working a lot, and so I didn't have a lot of things hobby-wise to do, and I wanted to make some type of impact in the communities that I cared about. So I volunteered at a couple places, and then I put my volunteer time too at the UIC's radio station, because as a music fan, I wanted to be part of a small community like that, and that gave me so much meaning of just being able to do things for the station and set up events at music venues, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I created a larger community, and I still hang out with a lot of people that I met at UIC's radio station. And so volunteering, I think, is something that I would recommend for anybody. I recommend it for clients that I see that deal with issues of loneliness. And it's, even though volunteering is free, but it creates so much more value, though. I think we have another question. But anyway, that's what I would recommend, like my colleagues have.
So my question is how solitude is different from loneliness?
Yeah, so I think that solitude is spending time with your own thoughts, feeling comfortable with yourself, being comfortable with being alone, while still understanding that you do have connections to other people. You're just not currently with them. Loneliness means that you feel you do not have those connections. So loneliness, that's why loneliness can happen in a crowd, right? You could be sitting, you could be sitting right here, and if you don't know anyone and you don't feel connected to other people and you don't say hi to others in your class, you could be in this room with, 30, 40 other people and still feel lonely, right? Because you don't have those connections. So I think it's about the felt connection to others. And by the way, you don't have to have connections to loads and loads of other people. I think oftentimes there's this performance on social media making people feel like they have to have dozens or hundreds of friends. It's not what you need. You need a solid few other people that you feel connected to and loved by, not in a romantic sense, but unconditional acceptance from others. You know that you can reach out if there's a problem. If you're upset about something, there's someone that you can talk to and they're not going to judge you. That's a feeling of connectedness, feeling like you belong. Solitude is different. Solitude is, I need some time on my own. I need to think through things. I need some time to decompress. And different ones of us need differing amounts of that. I know some people need a lot more recharge time than others. Some people need to be alone with their thoughts for a while every day. And other people, they don't have that need. That is definitely an individual difference. Does that help? Okay. Yeah.
Sure. Abraham Maslow would argue that you only need a few connections to meet your love and belongingness needs. So making a couple friends could be just enough, not having to have so many.
Yeah, I have a small clinical practice, that I do, and some of my clients will, pretty much my prescription is take a walk all the time. And it really is because, it was a book called Walking, I think it is, by Rebecca Solnit. And I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was something about walking when you're feeling lonely. We don't want to leave because we're afraid people are going to be like, oh my God, look at that person sitting alone. Look at them, they're a loser. Like, that's the narrative in our own mind. But when people are walking, even if they have nowhere to go, it looks like they have somewhere to be. And no one says, like, look at that person walking alone. Like, what a loser. Like, no one does that. So whenever it is, just take a walk, get out of that environment, because anyone, if you're in your head about what other people are thinking, they're going to think you have somewhere to go, and then usually you'll figure out something, you'll feel a little bit better.
I love it.
Good. Other questions?
That might be our best suggestion today, Mitch.
We're close on time. Maybe one quick question to end. Just doing a survey of the room. This is not scientific. I would guess that many of the audience members of the 50-ish or so people are early 20s, mid-20s, right? And not to raise hands or anything. But I think you all can comment more than me. A time of kind of leaving, like getting more independent, leaving home, finding your identity. Identities change from where we were in high school to where we're going to be. And all of us, of course, through our whole life change. But I think one thing is me getting older, I feel more like I know me and I'm able to stand on my own. Maybe talk a little bit about that. It is a unique time to be in your early 20s, mid-20s, and to know, sometimes you don't know you're going through a thing until you're through it, but it's helpful to think about it like, oh, I'm becoming the person I'm going to be. And I don't know if I'm asking a coherent question here, but maybe I think there's a commentary there from those of us that have been in our 20s at one time, and now that's way in the past. Like you find your way, and that's an important thing to just know. I think when you're doing it, like you're going to find your way, and that I think this conversation is part of that.
It may take a long time though, too, right? I mean, Erik Erikson's theory, if you've taken a Psych 105 class or Psych 104 class or personality course, Troy, he would say that identity development and differentiating yourself, starts at 13. Right? And might not end. That might not end till you're 30, 35, right? To figure out kind of who you are. And so I think it is a unique time as, you know, the ages that you're sitting in your seats in. But I would say it's absolutely normal, healthy. You should explore all kinds of different ideas. And I would say it is, you are probably going to find out that you might be different from your family, right? You might end up developing ideas, and your identity might eventually be different from the people that you grew up with, that you're around, as you kind of make your own mark. So that's going to happen.
I would also say taking chances on conversations, because I think a lot of us have an inner monologue going on about, oh, this person doesn't want to talk, they're sitting on their phone, you know, I don't want to bother them. But you never know when that next connection is going to happen, you know, and that person sitting next to you in your psych class might become a lifelong friend. You might have something really important in common with them, and they might help you to figure out who you are as well, because some of, you know, like the social identity theory suggests that some of who we become is part of our group membership and, you know, where we see ourselves belonging. But if we sit on our phone, I mean, the phone is great for a lot of things, but it has kind of, it's a protective blanket, you know, for us. And it helps us to feel like we don't need to reach out to people. And when you don't reach out to people, it can be harder to figure out kind of who you are and where you belong. So I would say, you know, when you're in a classroom, you're in a setting where you could potentially have a conversation with someone, maybe turn the phone over and look over to the person and say, man, that test, right? You know, reach out, take the chance.
Okay. I think I just wanted to ask that you talked about attachment styles and things like that. And I think I noticed a lot of the time it's kind of like a cycle in a lot of families where it's either toxic attachment or I forget the other one where you kind of don't attach at all.
Insecure,
Insecure.
avoidant.
Right. And I see it a lot where it's like the grandparents are like that and then the parents are like that. I think I just want to ask, how do you break those kind of cycles?
That's a great question. I mean, Western society kind of encourages that, right? You know, like this is what, you know, kind of do things on your own. But the reality is we need models. You know, someone smarter than me that once said 180 degrees from sick is still sick. So when you do the exact opposite, my parents never hugged me, so I'm going to smother my kids. You know, I'm going to give them all the love. Like that doesn't work either. So it really is about a balance, and it comes down to having a healthy relationship and finding models. Now, those models are ideal when when you have access to them, right? Whether it's through friends, maybe a neighbor, and you see kind of how their family works and functions, and then you get an idea of what that looks like. It's also, I think, you know, I think the first and foremost, you asking the question is what's paramount. A recognition that, hey, this is what I've experienced, and this isn't right, and I want to be different. And I think if you go in with that mindset and then having those experiences that kind of contribute to that change, future generations are going to see the beauty that you've created, and they're going to want to emulate that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just asking the good question and being aware is the first step. So thank you for that.
And maybe managing some of our own personal challenges that we've experienced throughout life will help us be in a healthier psychological mindset to be healthy for the people that come after us, right? You know, we've heard these examples many times where, you know, there's an issue on an airplane and the oxygen masks come off, and if we don't put the oxygen mask on ourselves first, how are we going to be able to help the other people around? So that's one suggestion that I would maybe offer, is to try to get ourselves in a good psychological state so we can be more effective for the other people around us. Yeah, that was a great question.
That may be a really good ending comment too.
Okay.
Okay. How about a round of applause? Thank you all. Thank you for the great questions.
The end of our program.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody,
Have a
for
good
your
day.
attention and your
Enjoy your break.
questions.
Travel safe if you
Yeah,
are.
enjoy your break.
Oh my God.
Right there.
Overprep.
Isaac's got it.
Triangular theory of love.
Yeah.
Look at the sexual scripts.
Yeah.
This is awesome, though. Tony, what'd you think?
Not bad. Not bad.